Yeah, we just had no idea what we were doing. I think that's the key thing. So we didn't know how many people we were going to have. We didn't know what we needed. I didn't know DC at all because I'd never lived here and I hadn't moved to DC yet. So I was looking for office space while I was in Missouri and trying to figure out a commercial lease in DC, which seemed crazy. So what we landed on actually ended up working great. We ended up subleasing space from the Association of Alternative News Weeklies, which was the trade association for the all news weeklies of the country, which itself was falling on hard times. And I'd hate to say it doesn't exist anymore, but I'm not sure it exists anymore. And so they had been in like a 5-year lease, had lost another number of people as that industry contracted. And so we actually had more people in the office than they did, even though we were the sub on the lease. And the advantage, the upside was their prime lease ended like 10 months after we started. So I knew that if I made a mistake, that I only had to endure it for 10 months and then we could figure out something else. As it turned out, it was great. It was perfect. It was like, it even had like a glass wall newsroom that you could kind of look into, and I had a separate office. So it actually felt more like, like a newsroom than I'd expected we would have. And so my hope would have been that we could have just stayed there, but the lease ran out, they were moving, and that was only a temporary thing. And so we moved in this, it was an office building, but it really originally been an apartment block built in like the 20s. And so it was an apartment is basically what it was. It's right next to the Heritage Foundation on the hill. Heritage actually bought the building after we moved out and they renovated it. And I haven't been in there in years, but it was, a bathroom with a bathtub and a shower and a kitchen and like an exhaust fan in the kitchen. And it was, I guess, one bedroom with a living room and I don't know, dining room. And so we turned the living room into the office space, the dining room and office space. And I took the bedroom as my office. And it was right on the Senate side of the hill. And so it was where senators would go to do their fundraising calls. So we moved in there in, I guess it was 10. And so it was where Obama's campaign, he had his office in there to do fundraising, and then they had used it as a campaign office. We actually looked at leasing that one instead, but the one we found upstairs was a little bigger. And so we'd see like, Senator Gillibrand coming in and out, right, doing her fundraising calls. It was easy access, and you can't do those from the Senate offices, that's the point. But it was a weird, funky building. The DC earthquake hit while we were in that building, and I thought we were coming down. We were on the top floor. That building was shaking. One of our editors at the time, Igor Bobik's a California kid, and he was terrified, right? I mean, the look on his face, I'll never forget. So it was a strange building. We ended up staying there longer than we thought. We kept trying to figure out what our next move was. We started thinking we might get into events, so we were looking for an office space that would have that. So we ended up there for maybe a year and a half or 2 years, maybe even a little bit longer overall, before we finally got our first real office in DC. So we started in 09 in DC, and we got our first real office in 12. So it was like a pretty long stretch. And then that was real. We had architects, we had engineers, we had a contractor come into a space that hadn't been renovated. And now we're back downtown again. And they did a great job. And it had a rooftop space. It had common spaces in the building you could use for events. So suddenly we were just like in a really nice building, which felt relatively normal and kind of like what we were after. But it took a little while to get there. And even that it turned out not, we overplanned. Like, this is 12. We think, things are moving, we're growing. And, I had room for like 15, 20 people in that office. And, ultimately that was more than we needed. Right. And so, but that was kind of where we landed for the long term. We were 7 years in that space. And now just in the last couple of years, we've moved again to a newer space. But these are, kind of normal offices. It was that first sort of 3-year stretch where things were a little weird. I mean, weird in the sense, like, I was going through before we got on the phone, and I found the receipts. I had scanned them at some point for this IKEA trip that I made in 2010, right before the election, right after we moved into that second office. That's the apartment. And I loaded up my hatchback with like 7 tables with extended legs, so everybody could have standing desks if they want. I got like these, architectural lamps, that you kind of clamp to the edge of the table, chairs. I don't remember. I think they were all like stools. And I just loaded all that. I spent a whole weekend just assembling IKEA furniture for our new office. Like, that's how, I think it's just hard to describe how bare bones and sort of close to the edge we always were. I remember one night, it was probably a Friday. And Christina Bellantoni, who was one of our original DC Bureau charter members, was on MSNBC, and I'm at the office cleaning up at the end of the week, and I'm like literally changing the toilet paper in the bathroom and taking the trash out as she's on MSNBC, and I'm just like, this is still weird. This is how this works? Do people understand how small? I just don't. So there are moments like that over the years where you're just kind of, it's a little bit of a mind warp, right? That we're doing this journalism thing that everyone's paying attention to, and at the same time, we're just, scratching and clawing to kind of make the whole thing work, right? And I think there's still an element of that. But for folks who come to TPM and haven't, like they learned about it from their parents or their college professor, and they think it's been around forever. And like in our minds, we're still like, we're just barely beyond changing the toilet paper ourselves, and in my own mind, right? So that office stands out for that reason. It was funny finding that accuracy.